I'm Dr. Ruth Westheimer. Thank you for joining me again here on Shalom TV. You know, when I had my lifetime television program, I would sometimes have Orthodox Jewish men come up to me to say how much they enjoyed my show. And I'd accept the compliment merely by smiling. And by the way, I also have many priests who are fans of mine, despite what I have to say about sex and particularly abortion. Part of the reason that my audiences have included such a broad range of the population, despite my dealing with, shall we call it, a delicate subject matter, is that I was never being prurient. I wasn't trying to excite anybody, but was merely trying to pass on good information on a subject that it seems everyone would like to know a little bit more about. Now, if you have a partner, I'm going to offer up a challenge. Talk to your partner about your sex life without being prurient. You might ask, why should I do that? We are partners. We have sex, so why should we talk about sex in a manner that's so boring that we don't turn each other on? I'm not saying to never talk about sex in a sexy way. I'm suggesting that if you really want to improve your sex life, you need to talk about it on an intellectual level. Raising the subject of sex when you want to be suggestive, when you want to try to light a spark in your partner is one thing. But lust has a way of clouding the brain, and so instead of having an exchange of ideas, the conversation is soon going to give way to other pursuits. But couples need to talk to each other about their sex life now and then. And for the conversations to get anywhere, the purpose shouldn't be to excite, but to exchange ideas. One way of making sure that sexual activity isn't on the menu is to have such a conversation outside of the bedroom. And better yet, outside your home altogether. Now, talking about sex requires privacy. It's hard to talk about your sex life at a restaurant when there are people at other tables on either side of you whose ears will surely pick up if they hear you talking about your favorite ways of having sex. I also don't think that you should have any type of serious conversation while driving, because the driver is supposed to be concentrating on what he or she is doing, and talking about sex is likely to be distracting. Of course, talking in a car while it's parked would be fine. So I think the best time to talk is while walking. If it could be on a quiet country road, that would be perfect. But even if you are in a city or town, unless somebody is walking right behind you, passers-by wouldn't catch more than a snippet of your conversation. So that shouldn't really disturb your privacy. The reason I say it's better to be moving is that talking about sex can cause some tension, and so the physical activity of walking will dissolve some of that tension. Also, if you don't want to respond right away, if you feel the need to gather your thoughts, if you are walking along, those moments of silence won't feel as awkward. So, what might you be talking about that would cause you to take a deep breath? There are lots of topics. One that frequently causes disagreements between two people is frequency. I often get posed the question, how often should two people of such and such an age be having sex? Sometimes the person asking the question feels that in their household they are not having sex often enough, while others hold the opposite view, that they are having sex too often. Actually, since this is Shalom TV, did you know that the Talmud actually has a discussion of how often a couple should have sex? And do you know which profession the Talmud says has sex the least often? Camel drivers. Why? Because they have to be away from home for such long periods of time. And can you guess which profession should have sex the most often according to the Talmud? Rabbis. Of course. But the real point that the Talmud understands how important sex is for a couple in love. Of course, to ask, am I having sex too often or am I not having sex often enough, is really a silly question. First of all, there is no one answer. Even if you cited the exact average of sexual frequency in American households, that wouldn't be the right answer for any particular couple. There are so many factors that affect how often a people has sex that you can't base your life on national averages. What you can say, however, is how you feel. If you feel that you are having either too little or too much sex, then it's a legitimate topic of discussion. However, because it's a sensitive topic, there is a good chance that one or both of you will act defensively. One of you may even go on the attack in order to duck this question. How do you expect me to have sex more often with you when you won't even? You fill in the dots. It's absolutely true that in many cases, the frequency that a couple has sex is linked to their overall relationship. If he's been annoying her in some way, or she him, or they are both annoying each other, then that's going to have a negative effect on their sex life. But the cause could also be something outside their relationship, such as troubles at work, or having to take care of elderly parents. Or it could be a lack of time, or else the effects of some medication. Older couples have special issues that can cause their sex life to dwindle, which I will cover at another time. By the way, there's this concept that it's mainly the women who want less sex and the men more. Now, I'll admit that the people who write to me don't constitute a scientific survey. But these days, I seem to get more questions from women saying their husband isn't as interested in sex as before than from men. The reasons that might be occurring is also a topic for another day. But whichever sex you are, if you are unsatisfied with the frequency of when you have sex, speak up. Even if you can't totally solve the problem, just airing out your grievances will make you feel better. Another topic you could explore is how you have sex, what positions you use, and so forth. According to the Jewish tradition, any kind of sex a couple wants to engage in is acceptable, so long as both partners are comfortable and willing. So I might recommend using some sort of aid for such a discussion, such as a book like the Kama Sutra. The reason I'm making this suggestion that if one partner brings up a particular position or a sex act, he or she will appear invested in it. And if his or her partner rejects that particular position, then the rejection might appear more personal. But if you are thumbing through a book, it will make it easier to give your opinions on many different sex acts, and thus there is less of a risk that you will hurt your partner's feelings. From a tactical point of view, if one partner wants to try something that's a little more adventuresome, I would advise taking baby steps first. What those steps might be will depend on your starting position. But if, for example, if you have been using the same positions over and over, maybe even only one position before suggesting new positions, which might be a bit more adventuresome, you might try having sex in new places. Certainly, having sex in different rooms of your house rather than your bedroom will add some variety. And a different room might naturally suggest different positions, because if there isn't a bed around, then that will almost automatically lead you to try some new things. You could also have a date where you just go to a nearby motel. Sometimes getting out of the house altogether can do wonders for your sex life. One reason that somebody might not want to try any new variations to their sex life is the belief that once a particular door has been opened, there'll be no shutting it. So, part of your communications should include stating the ground rules, which would include that any experimentation you might do wouldn't mean that it automatically becomes a part of your repertoire. If after trying something new, one partner decides that it's out of bounds, that would be the end of it. And speaking of opening and shutting doors, this particular door of communicating about your sex life needs to be opened regularly. If the only time that you talk about sex is when one of you has a complaint or special request, that's going to make it harder to have these discussions. If there's always an ulterior motive of some sort, the partner without such a motive may keep ducking such a meeting. But if you regularly schedule a time to talk sex, even if that regularity is as little as only once a year, say on the anniversary of the day you met or first had sex, then that will take some of the pressure off. Neither one of you is going to say, aha, he or she wants to talk, so that must mean there's a problem. If it's your scheduled time to talk about sex, then you both can go into it with an open mind. Of course, talking about sex more often than once a year would be better. But even once a year would be a lot more often than most couples do and would lead to improvements in your sex life. Another way to spark a conversation about sex is to point out something that you see in the media related to sex. Couples often discuss items they see in the news, but not necessarily those having to do with sex. If you make a point of seeking out news stories about sex, which isn't hard to do on the internet, then those can serve as a means of discussing your own sex life. Having said that, you need to have open communications about sex. I also want to repeat myself regarding something else I've said here, and that's not to be too open. Just because a thought has flashed through your head, or maybe flashes regularly, doesn't mean you have to let your partner know about it. If what you want to say is going to be shocking, there is no predicting the reaction. So maybe the wise move in such instances is to keep your mouth shut. Let me end with a quick story that illustrates that last point. At an office retreat, everyone was asked to admit a secret. And one man admitted that he was sexually attracted to cows. As you could predict, when everyone had returned home from the retreat, wherever he went in the company, he was greeted with a low, chorus of moos. So, yes, communications between you and your partner are important, but it's also important that such communications be handled wisely. I'm Dr. Ruth Westheimer. See you next time here on Shalom TV.